Planning Commission meeting. I'd like to remind everybody to please silence their phones or put them on stun, as my dad likes to say. And again, if you have not done so, there is a sign-up sheet over here where we ask if you would like to comment, or you might want to comment later, to please list your name and your address. You will be given definitely an opportunity to comment on the presentation tonight. Tonight's presentation is going to be recorded, and this recording will be posted tomorrow and available online. So because we are recording, I would just like to ask that you refrain from sidebar conversations. The mics are pretty sensitive. We want to make sure that we have a clear recording, not only for you, but for the audience that will be listening, and also for our note taker so he can take accurate notes this evening. So if you're going to have a sidebar conversation, if you would kindly step outside and be respectful to your neighbors who are trying to listen to the conversation taking place this evening. The minutes of this particular meeting will be posted on September 21st. We will vote on it that day, and then it will be posted, so you'll be able to see it at that time. And with that, we are going to begin with our roll call. Mark, if you would like to proceed with that.
Ms. Murray?
Present.
Mr. Schaefer? Mr. Gutowski?
Yep.
Mr. Devine? Ms. Blanken?
Present.
Ms. Carroll? Mr. Sands?
Here.
Mr. Quill?
Here.
Ms. Elway?
Here.
We have a quorum, no?
Thank you. Next on our agenda is minutes of the August 17th meeting. These were distributed to the Planning Commission. Comments were received back. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve them.
Thank you, Dee. All in favor? Any abstentions? Stacy abstained, Mark. At this time, I would ask our commissioner if he has a report.
I have no report.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, so tonight's one and only agenda item is MEH Investments LLC and 380 Haws LP for the development of 380-402 Haws Lane. And I just want to start this meeting by giving a little bit of background. Before you is sitting your Planning Commission. We are all volunteers who are serving on the bequest of the Board of Commissioners. We make recommendations on land development plans and they're sent along to the commissioners. Sometimes they take our recommendations and sometimes they don't. But we like to be thoughtful in the development of our community, and that's why we are here volunteering. We are all taking time away from our work and from our families. And I want you to know that we are here just like you as members of this community because we care about it. The calendar of these meetings, just so you know, is published a year ahead. And we always have our meetings on the first and third Tuesday of the month. And we were asked to have this meeting tonight because there is a busy schedule of other applications before us. And we like to respond to them in a timely manner. So they asked us to move forward and not cancel or reschedule this meeting. That said, I would like to stress to you, my neighbors, that there is no decision being made here tonight. There is no voting being done here tonight. This is a courtesy presentation by the applicant to you, the community, and to us, the planners. They are just seeking comment on this proposal. There is no formal submission at this time. If there was a formal submission, we would be looking at stormwater management, traffic studies, lighting studies, ISA arborist evaluations of trees on the property. None of that is happening tonight. All of that would come down the road at public hearings that you are more than welcome to attend and vocalize your comments as well. And what I want to stress to you tonight is this evening is an opportunity for us to listen, for you also to listen and comment and digest. And for those that are listening to this recording this evening, take what you hear and go to a Board of Commissioners meeting and express your concerns there as well. Because the Board of Commissioners are your elected officials, okay? So I hope tonight will not be a late night. Our tap out time is about 10 o'clock. And I don't know about you, but I have a kindergartner starting her first day of school tomorrow. And she very much wanted me home tonight. So I would like to get home earlier than later, okay? So tonight, our applicant is going to be sharing their proposal. And I would ask the applicant if they could share what the current approved project for the site is, so that our audience can consider a comparison of what you are proposing tonight. Because that's what we're looking for our community to comment on. Do they like what is currently approved to be built on the site? Or do they like the concept of an alternative? And that's the kind of feedback you're looking for, and that's the feedback our commissioners are looking for. So with that, I would like to turn over the presentation to you, and for the audience, understand that once this presentation is complete, we will go to the list, I will read names, and you will have an opportunity to come up and give your public comment, okay? So with that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to the applicant, and I welcome you to the Planning Commission.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This evening, my name is Chris Canavan. I'm the president of WB Homes. We are the equitable owners of the property at 380 Haws Lane. Next to me, as most of you all know, is Brian Halligan of MEH Investments, and Brad McCleary is also with us from MEH Investments. Thank you very much for that lead-in from the standpoint of the discussion this evening, and I'm going to keep this presentation as short and tight as possible in honoring your wishes, and I think most of the audience has seen much of this before, but it is exactly that. There is a existing allowance for uses on this property. They are institutional uses. There is an approved plan. Brian will discuss the approved plan in a moment. We have an alternative that we think is a better alternative for this particular piece of property than what is allowed under the institutional use as a transition between the residential uses across the street and the educational uses behind the property. And we want to just lay those out for you. So Brian, I would ask you just as a starting point, just lay out what had previously been approved on the property and in general, what with maybe some variation would need to, move forward for an approved plan under the institutional as is zoning.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, and thank you for everybody's time tonight. When I purchased the property, there was already an approved plan for 107 unit of assisted living facility. It was a 4-story building consisting of 107 units and some, common area, cafeteria, very institutional like type facility. When I originally purchased the property, I thought a age-restricted rental community was a viable option. We came in and the neighbors didn't seem to want that compared to the assisted living. Since then, I've come up with a whole list of ideas and alternative uses of what can be done, understanding that I live in this township. My sister lives on Haws Lane. My parents live on Azalea Way. I want to do a development that is mindful of the entire community. I have continued to be in touch with neighbors and try to share different ideas and plans. And where we are today is trying to figure out, is this townhouse plan better than what the institutional plan is? And Chris is going to talk on that a little bit more, but the previous plan of 107 units, it was approved. All of the approvals are very dated. It would need to be updated considerably. That being said, there's a by right plan path that can easily get back to that. And in addition to that, there are alternative uses besides the assisted living that are permitted in the institutional zoning who have expressed interest. I'm significantly vested with a couple different groups who have showed interest and have been at the site numerous times. And I am just waiting to see what direction that we should go in. A lot of people are under the impression that nothing is going to happen here. development is imminent, and I want to do something that is thoughtful and mindful to the community. I offered to sell it to the township. I offered to sell it to the school board. They led to dead ends, and now we are trying to come up with uses that might work. Usually you get the big bad plan and you see that, and then you say, I don't want that, here's this. This is kind of a different order where the better plan, in my opinion, is presented first. And the underlying zoning plan would not need the details of neighbor meetings and everything. It would just be designed by right, come in and submit for land development. So I'll let Chris talk about this plan a little bit more from the last time we were in and the changes that were made. But that's the quick background of what can be done there. And there are a lot of other options that aren't discussed that could be done, but you know, I don't have plans for that right now. So
Thank you, Brian. So I think to frame this, we're talking 107 unit assisted living facility is one of the uses. There are other uses that are there. We are looking at a plan now on the board. Many of you may recall this from when we met in June, which was a Zoom meeting. So it's nice to see all of you in person. That plan was a 41 unit townhome community. Taking some of the feedback that we received from the planning commission at that time and feedback we received from neighbors, the density has been reduced on this to 36 units. 36 units on a 4.7 acre site would put it in line with the density allowance in your D residential for townhomes. This would be about 7.5 units to an acre. D residential allows 8 dwelling units an acre. It also, on this particular plan, would preserve a quadrant of the back property, approximately 1.5 acres of the wooded area without disturbance. That would be an area that would be the bottom of the plan. That was some of the discussion items we had. However, there was also some other feedback we received during that planning commission meeting about the row of townhomes that were shown along Haws Lane and whether that was the appropriate impact on the property. So Brandon, if we could just go to the next slide. Might take a moment to leave. There we go. So we also looked at this in another way. What if we didn't line all the units up along Haws Lane and we did a little bit more of a conventional road network, 36 units again. The units are removed from Haws Lane and you distribute the green area more around the site rather than putting it all to the rear of the site. I would say for both of these plans, these are just proofs of concept. Really, the threshold question this evening is, does it make sense to look at an alternative use of residential, townhome residential on this site rather than institutional? That's the threshold question. If that answer is yes, there are then work to be done with the planning commission, with the residents about what a layout would look like within the context of once zoning is changed, we would spend time planning that to determine what is the best way to lay this out. To that end, we have hired a professional arborist who is undertaking a full tree study of the property, and that will be completed by the middle of September. And that's the type of information that would inform, I think, the decision-making on what a good layout would be, so as to maybe preserve what are the best pockets of trees on the property, where are the best trees to save, and that may inform the layout and planning of this. But I think, as you mentioned earlier, there is a lot of work that has to be done on a project like this. But all of that is really after the threshold question is answered of, does it make sense to change this to a residential use, similar to what would be allowed in a D residential use, which is often adjacent to your institutional, rather than the underlying institutional use. We are, as an applicant, more than willing to work through design elements of that to look at what is the best layout, what is the best or least impact from that to the community. Is it an access plan like this, or is it one that lines all the houses up along the frontage with rear loaded? Things we can work on. I will note, just as a point on here, this rendering didn't quite show it. On the other rendering, it obviously shows the existing sidewalk on Haws Lane. The sidewalk on Haws Lane would stay on this plan, obviously, too. We weren't trying to disconnect it in any way. Both plans would provide for pedestrian accessibility through the site to the rear to the school properties. So there are opportunities for pedestrian connectivity. There's opportunities to enhance stormwater management in this area by a plan such as this. You'll notice a large detention basin in the bottom right corner, which would be the upper right of the plan. We showed that it's underground detention in the previous plan, but there's opportunities, even if we oversize that, to help existing conditions in the neighborhood. Those are all things, though, that are planning elements that would happen down the road. What I did want to present also this evening, though, is I have a couple overlays of, I'll call the first one Concept A, which we don't have the plan of, but it was the original by right plan of institutional. And then we've overlaid both plans on what would have been that to see it. I don't know if we can light up. There's a yellow underline of this. So the red plan on top is the first concept plan, which have all the units up towards Haws Lane. The yellow underlayment is what would an institutional plan would have. It shows where the impact is between the two different sites. Obviously, we're impacting significantly less of the site in the rear with the townhome plan as shown here. It would also, the institutional plan would have had approximately 2.55 acres of impervious surface, which is 54% of the site, whereas either of the townhome plans are in the 1.8 acre range for impervious, which is only 39% of the site. So it's about a 15% reduction because you don't have the mass area of building, you don't have the mass area of parking that you would on an institutional site. So when thinking about why would we change the zoning from what is allowed today to something different, there are issues that you want to look at. What is the impact on traffic? What is the impact on stormwater management? What is the impact on the view shed in the community? What is the impact on green space? I think on each of those topics, because the townhome community has the ability to be flexibly designed, the road network can be maneuvered. You don't have a massive building. You don't have massive parking lots. You have a greater ability to have a more sensitive design on the site. And the assisted living facility and the 36 townhomes come in about similar amount of peak hour trips. Most of the other institutional uses would have higher peak hour trips. So from a traffic standpoint, it's either a wash or it's better with the townhomes. From a stormwater standpoint, I think we could do a significantly better job with the flexible layout to both improve stormwater on this site as is, and also to help downstream neighbors. I think many people look at this and say, oh, it's a wooded lot. Well, if you walk through the lot, there's a lot of stone, semi-paved areas from remnant uses. There's several buildings on there. There is runoff coming off of that site as it currently stands. It's uncontrolled. A modern design stormwater system will help with that and would help with any downstream flow coming off of our site. And that's something we can work on. And I think we have the space to maybe, as I mentioned, oversize the stormwater management to maybe overcompensate for our site that may also assist downstream. Again, planning issues down the road. But from our viewpoint, when you stack up certain critical planning issues between institutional in this particular area and residential, I think the residential blends better with the existing single-family residential across the street, blends to the educational academic uses to the rear, and is a more sensitive use of the 4.7 acres. If you want to go to the next slide, just to walk through these real quick, and then we'll get to the purple is the new plan that we proposed, and then you can see the yellow underneath of it. They actually, on an outbound, on the outer edge of the impact, this and the institutional use have an almost similar impact. However, in the middle, we have the opportunity for green spaces that you don't have on the institutional uses when it comes down to it. So again, less impact from the overall development, and the outer perimeters will still be able to be used as green and buffer areas when it comes down to it. So with that, I think I've covered a number of the topics we wanted to hit. I think I've framed the issue that we're talking about here. It's an institutional use or this residential use. We think the residential use is appropriate. It does require a change of zoning. The form of that change of zoning is really where we're at now, in which we are asking for the feedback from the Planning Commission so that we can go to the Board of Commissioners, and if they so choose, would authorize their staff, if they think it's a good idea to investigate this, to come up with a form of zoning change that would allow this use here. There are several ways to do it. None of them have been fully vetted yet because we don't want, and we recognize the issue of, you have a lot of institutional in your community. You don't want to open this up everywhere without thinking through how it will impact areas. So we want to make sure it's done sensitively So it's the outcome that the township's looking for, while we're still ending up with the project that we're looking at.
Thank you.
And with that, oh.
Back to me. Okay, so as I said before, we're going to allow the planners to ask any questions of the applicant first, while Mark is collecting my little list over here that we will then open it up to public comment. So at this time, do any of the planning commissioners, Bob?
Yeah, I have two questions which don't appear to be related to each other. The first one is on the townhome plans. Is there a plan for the management of that green space? Is the town home owner's lot ability to manage limited?
Back to one of those plans, and I'll be happy to answer that question. The way we would develop this site would be as a planned unit development. The unit owners would only own the footprint of their building and have limited access to the parking area, driveway adjacent to them. The remainder of the space would be owned and maintained by a homeowners association. The area and, the manicured area would be maintained as you would typically expect. I think we'd be happy to work with both our arborist and the township to come up with a more active management plan for what would be the residual open space areas so that that could be maintained over the years, specifically for its intended purpose.
And that can be a part of the articles of incorporation.
That would be within the homeowners association documents. There's very specific requirements of the association. And those are also rights that can be granted for enforcement to the township, so that if the association doesn't do what it's supposed to do, that's typically when you see it with stormwater management. If they're not maintaining their stormwater management, the township has the right to enforce that and charge the association to make sure it's done properly, so it doesn't become a burden on the community.
So I actually have two other questions, if it's okay. If you guys will let me do that. You mentioned that other groups have shown other uses, interest for uses that are within institutional zoning. And would you care to comment on the nature, not necessarily the approachee, but what is the nature of some of those proposed uses that you're speculating about?
Yeah, so, after the first time with the rental community, I had the property under agreement with an assisted living group. COVID hit. They wanted to stay part of it, but needed more time, which then I didn't give them. They are back in the picture, ramping back up, that same group. They're based out of Chicago. More active, have had 4 showings on the site, is a behavioral health facility who has basically given this their top site, full development, existing facilities. Their CFO and CEO came from Asheville, North Carolina, up to the site. So they've had a couple visits, and then there are 2 other assisted living facilities that are interested. Out of respect to Chris, who is the equitable owner, I can only go so far with those groups, showing the site. And, that's what concerns me about this in this situation, is that, like, I want to be careful what goes there. And I know a lot of people are sensitive to any change in any development. What I think we have the opportunity here is doing a development that everybody will be able to deal with when it's all said and done. I know change is hard in the beginning, but at the end of the day, townhouses would be a better use than some of these conversations that I'm having.
So finally, for me, so Chris, you said that the threshold question is, does it make sense to develop townhomes rather than institutional? And if so, then we'll pursue whatever kind of zoning change is most appropriate. But there's another question, I think, that the commissioners need to consider and the township needs to consider. And that's what is the impact on changing any institutionally zoned site to residential on the others? Not just as a setting a precedent of, or perception of a precedent, which is just as effective as an actual precedent sometimes. That the commissioners and the township may want to consider the inventory of institutional sites that we have and which ones also might be subject to this kind of approach. And what does that mean long-term for the township in terms of maintaining the ability to have institutional uses within the township? So it's not as a site specific, if the rest of the world wasn't there, heck, fits in very well. But what does it do to, in my view, but what does it do to our inventory and projected uses? I think that's a threshold question at the same, I think they're neck and neck at the finish line.
I would agree with you, and I think that's where it came down to how, if this were to move forward, the structure. I know in other communities that I'm involved in, there are some places where you would have both uses are allowed. So that it's really then the market force or what the particular property would allow, that would allow, townhomes or institutional uses. And sometimes it's done by conditional use, and sometimes it's just because each property is slightly different, each neighborhood is slightly different, and some are more conducive one way or the other. And I agree with you, that's a critical issue to be considered, and that's one of the things we would need to work with staff to come up with an appropriate answer to that question.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, and I think it inhibits or it puts a brake on saying, yeah, this looks better or it doesn't look better. Because what does it do for the township's opportunities down the road? And so it's like an inventory of what we have, but also the institutional zoning, as I think, as you pointed out, most people recognize the zoning maps were done fairly long ago. We did do industrial. We looked at industrial and light industrial zoning and we revisited that. And we've looked at some, the Bethlehem Pike plan as a whole, which is an overlay. But we haven't been asked to approach institutional zoning needs and configuration in the township as the township has developed greatly since the original map was laid out.
Thank you, Bob.
Right.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Jerry?
Would you spend a little more time? The planning commission before this meeting was held, received a number of emails from residents. And in each one of those, parking was a big issue. And then you mentioned in your presentation that with the assisted living and then with this, the parking would be the same. Could you spend more time on that? Because that, to me, that's a big issue with a lot of the residents, is what happens to the parking. I know that, when you have big events, you're going to have a parking problem. Yeah, I mean, there's no way you can get around that. That's just, you get more cars there. But would you spend a little more time on that issue?
And just to be clear on what I said before, the traffic impact, meaning peak hour trips as
Right.
measured, is similar between assisted living and townhomes. If you heard me say parking, I apologize.
Well, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Just, but the township requires 2 parking spaces per residential unit in your ordinance, as any residential unit requires. What we've shown on the plans here is every townhome unit has at least a 1-car, if not a 2-car garage, plus 2-car driveway, okay? And on this plan, we were able to add, we had 24 overflow parking spots in addition to what each of the units would have. On the other plan, which was again, just a proof of concept, there's 18 overflow spots, which is half a spot per unit, which is a pretty typical calculation. There are probably areas where we could add extras too. They're perpendicular spots throughout. In our experience developing townhomes, that is a very good number of parking spaces to both handle the daily and then, not everybody's having the party at the same time scenario when it comes down to it. Our intent is to park our property appropriately for the use that we have and not be burdening the neighbors. We don't want that for the people we are selling the product to have that kind of problem, and we absolutely don't want to impinge upon the neighbors. We've heard loud and clear that there are parking issues there. Obviously, when there's events at the elementary school, there are issues. When there's drop-off, pickup, we're trying to make sure that we would be happy to work through that in the planning process. If we could identify even a few more spaces, we'd be happy to do that to make sure that we park this project appropriately for the number of units that we have.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else? Okay. At this time, I'm going to open it up to public comment. And I'm going to go through our list. And if I butcher your name, I apologize. It's been a long day. We're going to start with, well, this is an easy one. Tom Smith.
Yeah, I had just had a sort of a speculative question. My concerns with this site is that it's really close to the elementary school, and it's sort of crammed in between two other areas. Has the developers given any thought to perhaps buying some land on what is there on the left-hand side, what is Harston Hall, opening up the space a little bit and putting your townhomes in there, just spreading them out so the density is not so great, and also perhaps moving the whole site a bit farther away from the high school? Is that something that you would consider? Of course, it would mean an investment in more land. Alternatively, what about buying a whole bunch of land from Harston Hall and moving the whole thing over there? As my concern is that it's just so close to the high school. I appreciate that you've sort of spread out the buildings there on the site, but as many will point out, that the nice sort of collection of trees toward the back to some degree decimated. And I understand that you're working with the arborist and all, but it seems to me that more space for this development might be helpful. And there seems to be buildings there on the lower left-hand corner. I don't know if those are existing buildings. But I mean, would it be conceivable to buy a few acres over there, 2 or 3 acres, and just spread the stuff out? That's just my thought.
You want us to respond on each?
If you
comment,
would
or-
like to, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously Harston Hall as a institutional use, staying as an institutional use, the zoning requires a minimum lot of acreage for that property to exist as it does also. So they can't sell off ground and then be undersized for the use as it currently exists.
Well, are you suggesting that they have no wiggle room, that they're using?
I'm not suggesting they don't have any, but I'm just saying that is one of the first. I think that we've tried to look at how to best buffer the uses while also interconnecting. I don't think the residential townhome use is incompatible with either the high school or the elementary school. In fact, I think it's a better transition use than the underlying institutional, as it is decentralized and it provides the opportunity for pedestrian connectivity and walkability to both of those opportunities.
Yeah, that was not my point. My point is that the thing is very dense and it is very close to the elementary school. Could it be moved a bit too farther to I guess that would be to the west?
Well, and we'll continue, just finish off that. This plan is the secondary thing. If you consider where the units were on the previous plan, we've moved most of the units interior and away so that you have the basin and the green space and the parking area and all closer down, just again to create that area of space.
No, yeah.
That's where layout and design is something we would work with the planning commission on.
But given the acreage, there's a limited amount of options you have.
Yeah.
I'm just suggesting if you could carve out some space to the left there, you would provide yourself with more flexibility. That's all.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Eric Lucas. You can, and just for the record, if you decide you want to pass, just say pass if I come to your name, okay? Go ahead, Eric.
Okay, you have,
Yes, so just so I was going to mention this later after we got through, the township received 18 email. I'm sorry, that's an update. Correspondences. And a little bit later, Mark will be reading their names and addresses into the record. And just so you know, all that correspondence will be part of the record and provided to the applicant so they can take that into consideration. So thank you.
Okay, so I was told that you will have a copy of what I have.
If you were one of the first ones that came in, then yes. Then yes, we did receive your correspondence.
Do you have it to refer to?
I printed mine,
Does everybody
All
have it
the-
to refer
with
to?
all the images.
Right,
Yep.
so you all have it?
I didn't bring it, but I have.
I'm sorry.
I brought mine. Yeah, I didn't bring it.
I'm going to be referring to it.
Okay, well, I
If you have
can,
more, you can give them over here.
No, I was told that copies will be made for you and be part of your packet.
we were provided the packet prior to the meeting. I did review mine and I brought mine with me.
So you're the only person that has a copy.
Right, we had it electronically, so.
Okay, so nobody has it, right?
Printer, so.
Okay,
We can share. We'll share.
Go ahead.
okay, so just before I start with my handout, institutional, we're talking about institutional parking and assisted living parking and parking here are going to be about the same. Because staff for an institutional setup, if you have 107 units, could have about 80 staff that are coming in 3 shifts. So there's going to be plenty of parking required and plenty of parking usage. That's just an aside comment. So my first slide is a satellite view of the area, which I wish you would have submitted because it shows the whole property borders on Harston Hall and all athletic fields. So the property does not border on any residential area behind Haws Lane. So I think it's important to know that you have the elementary school, you have the high school, baseball fields, and you have Harston Hall. So when we're talking about trees or screens, in my opinion, they're not necessary because there's nothing bordering the property. First rendering is my slide number 3.
Mhm.
And that is the first one that Mr. Canavan gave. And I put it in here only so that you would see it. But again, it's lacking the satellite view, so you can't see what's unencumbered. Well, I've been at the 3 orientation meetings now, and the meeting to the commissioners meeting. And Mr. Canavan gave us 2 places to look at. One is a development in Lansdale and a development in Gwynedd. And the invitation for tonight's meeting said we were going to review 2 renderings. It did not say that we were going to discuss institutional or assisted living. So it only said we're going to look at these 2 renderings.
We are considering this, but what we are being asked by the Board of Commissioners is to ask the community, do you prefer going down a residential route versus the current approved, which is an institutional project?
I know, I'm just saying the invitation for tonight's meeting
Okay,
was to review these 2 renderings.
and we're
So
reviewing them.
at that point,
Yep,
I assumed that the institutional was off the table because of the way the invitation read.
I apologize. I didn't write the invitation.
Okay, so my slide number 4 is Cannon Avenue in Lansdale. And it would be something like the first slide. Can you put the first slide up and give me a hand?
I don't have control, unfortunately.
You will eventually.
Mhm.
There you go.
I have to tell you, off to the side, Mr. Canavan has a great history as a township manager and in development that he has not shared. So he's a very, very respected person in this business. And we're lucky to be dealing with him. So slide number 4 is Cannon Avenue. And the distance between the curb and the house is 30 feet. And that's what we would be expecting on Haws Lane. Number 5 is just another picture of the kind of houses that would be on this development. Number 6 is an older development that has more trees with the same setback. Number 7 is a courtyard that would be between the houses where there is no parking. So even that would have,
The courtyard you're talking about here, or Ms. Luke, I got the red dot. What are you talking about?
right.
Right.
So even that has impervious surface. Number 8 is a picture of the parking area that would be just over to the right a little bit where you just showed. So
This
that
one.
would be a driveway.
Yep, that would be the in-between, which is, and I'll answer Mr. Lucas in a second.
Sure.
So that would be a driveway. You'd have all the other driveway. You'd have 2 parking spots per house. And that much impervious on this layout. Number 9 is, I just took a ride. It was a regular afternoon. And wherever there's allowed parking at the Lansdale location, there is parking for those houses. So people don't necessarily only utilize the parking that's allowed for them. They utilize every piece of parking around the neighborhood. Number 10 is a street adjacent to the houses. So at the right of the picture are the houses development. And in the 10 minutes that I was standing there taking this picture, somebody pulled in on this street and walked to the development. So my assumption would be that the people living on Haws Lane, for convenience purposes, would be using Wedgewood and Green Hill for convenience parking, even if they're living there. And I made the comment at some of our other meetings that if 3-bedroom townhouses there have children, and they'll have at least 2 cars per family, they'll have garages full of, and I said the word stuff, that there'll be garages full of bicycles and you name it, extra furniture, whatever it is. So the people living there will be utilizing those 2 outside parking lots, I think. And when they have guests, they'll be using Wedgewood and Green Hill, especially the people who are living on Haws Lane.
Mr. Lucas, I apologize for interrupting you, but we do have a long list of people to comment this evening.
Okay, I have a couple
Would-
more slides. I didn't know I had, I don't know.
I know, but we do have to take everybody's comment. Do you have some key points or questions you want to ask of the developer?
Okay, just let
That
me, give me a couple minutes.
Okay.
Number 11 is Wedgewood Road, when one of the neighbors was having a little event. And it shows how tight that is. And number 12 is that same Wedgewood Road, that same day where there's a car driving up it. So you can see there's only room for 1 car. And if the development is this development, and there are more people parking there, it's really going to be a difficult area. And then 13 is just that car a little bit further up. Number 14 is the second rendering. And 15 is the Gwynedd Fairland Village. To give you a perspective of what that would look like is number 16, where there's front parking. There's not the complication of having a road and all the other. So it would be just a circle. Can you do the second one? Ren? So people would drive in, they park. And it would not be as complicated an area. So the slides on 16 and 17 is what I think that area would look like with front parking. And then number 18 is just my summary. So my assumption is it's something will be built on Haws Lane by the new owners. And like I said, the invitation for this meeting wasn't talking about institutional, it was just talking about these 2. Whatever is built, the impervious coverage will be about the same. More now that I've heard about the institutional impervious would be higher. Stormwater management would be addressed, as you've said. I'm hoping there'll be no more traffic lights and no more stop signs on Haws Lane, but there would be an additional need for a crossing guard if you have the first rendering. Decisions now will affect future use for Horston Hall property, if that ever becomes available. And word has it that the township is looking for something to do with the golf course. So whatever we're talking about here is going to lap over into those decision-making, meaning justifications are going to be the same. Single-family homes or township open space would have been nice if we would have grabbed this when it was offered to the township. And it's a shame that the school district or the township didn't jump on that. And the planning commission members will personally visit others of the builders' sites to see what these houses look like before anybody makes a decision about anything. That it's not just discussed here. For the first rendering, there is no parking on Haws Lane. So you assume the Haws Lane residents on this rendering would be using Wedgewood and Green Hill for parking convenience. Congestion on Wedgewood Road during events and school drop-off and pickup would be complicating everything. And I'm not asking you to put no parking signs on these streets now, because we're sort of handling that, but we're concerned about increased parking. And there's much on-street parking utilized on Cannon Avenue in Lansdale to justify my thoughts that Wedgewood and Green Hill would be used. And then comments on the second rendering, Fairville Village in Gwynedd and our own Penns Wood on Haws Lane, if they're set back, would be about the same. My granddaughter has lived in this area for 15 years. She didn't even know Penns Wood was there. We took a ride through there one day. She said, I didn't know this place existed. So if we can do the second rendering eventually, if that's the decision, and move that back, and it's not going to impinge on anything, even if you move it back all the way, because you only have sports fields there. It'll be hidden like Penns Wood is, and I think that would be a benefit. And if it's back, and trees and other bushes in front on Haws Lane, that would discourage people from walking over to Wedgewood and Green Hill for parking, and it would hide those houses from view.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Only comment I'd make on that, and I have appreciated the time that Mr. Lucas spent on this, is both the projects in Lansdale, I only referenced them for the rear loaded design of them. The one on the one side, known as Cannon Square, has 22 units to the acre. The Penn Square project was 28 units to the acre, significantly higher density than anything we're talking about here. And they're an in-town, right off of Main Street, walkable community, which I'm sure you could recognize.
Which makes
So,
more sense for that location
for
due to
that
density.
location and why that parking looks like it does in that particular area. So,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Molly Fanning? Passing? Going once? Going twice? Okay. Ellen Stevenson?
Hi, thank you. Hi. I just wanted to ask the Planning Commission a question before I just go into 2 minutes. And that is, does the Planning Commission, while you're planning and receiving proposals, consider the value of the land when you are making a decision on what to recommend to the Board of Commissioners? And especially the value of the land as it protects our environment?
So I guess I'll make my own personal comment. Sure. If you would like, jump right in, Mark.
Yes.
It's a complex question.
Anytime a subdivision is on now.
Yep.
Anytime a subdivision or land development application is submitted, the township has hired me, Mr. Ford, that's sitting over in the corner. We have the Shade Tree Commission review any plan that comes in for their environmental expertise that they have. In addition to that, there's a member of the Planning Commission that's been sitting up there, hello Bob, that has, Bob, am I exaggerating, 50 years of experience?
40.
40, as an arborist and in land preservation. So my answer to you would be yes, they take into consideration the environmental impact on a plan. However, there's limiting features to that. when a property owner brings in a plan for development, the zoning ordinance has certain coverage percentages, certain uses, certain requirements that have to be adhered to. And in most cases, the applicant does everything they can to stay away from the zoning hearing board. Because that's a financial rabbit hole that you're never quite sure what it's going to cost or how much time it's going to take you to get through the process. So the applicant tries to stick to a zoning ordinance as much as they can. In this case, what you have is an applicant that owns a property that is proposing a use that is not a use by right within the particular district
Right.
the property is located in. So at some point down the road, you're going to see one of three avenues the applicant take, no matter what the outcome is of recommendation that comes out of this board. This plan doesn't go anywhere else. The applicant needs to fix the zoning. That's either going to be a zoning rewrite, where they amend the current zoning within the industrial district to allow this use with a set density, with, I'm sure, different types of setbacks and height limitations and green space requirements. And they'll probably make it as site-specifically as humanly possible so it doesn't impact the balance of the institutional districts. They'll walk a very thin line so they don't end up with something that can be perceived as a spot zoning application. They may elect to do a zoning overlay that affects all of the institutional districts. And again, limited in such a way that it's site specific to this particular property and maybe one other. Or they end up going down the rabbit hole and going to the zoning hearing. But the answer to your question is, yes, the township takes the consideration to the environmental impact of the property, and they give great weight to it. And a lot of that's dictated by the requirements over and above what the township does. No matter what happens on this property, if this applicant disturbs an acre or more, they need a permit from the state. It dictates what can happen with soil erosion, soil protections, and Montgomery County Conservation District, at the request of DEP, will be doing regular inspections there. There's stormwater management requirements. There's clean water discharge requirements. There's also tree preservation requirements. There's landscaping standards, setback, and stormwater requirements that we'll get to at some point down the road, no matter what they propose. So the answer to your question, I would say would be yes.
And how long has this process been in place, would you say?
I'm sorry, the question was how long? will we
How
be doing it
long,
this way?
how long has, yeah,
Well, it predates me. I've
Mhm.
only been with the township 18 months. Bob, you served on the planning commission how many years?
20 years.
I'm only 11.
11?
I'm 11 years on the board.
Angela?
Yeah, around that 20.
11? Mr. Sands?
15.
15? So when I say it predates me,
mhm.
I was probably thin without gray hair when you started.
I had brown hair when I
The
started.
reason I ask that is because we all know that global warming is here. And we certainly learned a lot in the last couple of weeks. And if that's been the process, and it's probably the process all over, I would suggest that there should be an environmental review that this board takes very seriously when they're looking at any proposal, not the run-of-the-mill environmental study that's done by the developer, but that this board, which actually acts for the entire community, takes a look at not in a silo of one project, but the community and even broader than the community. And I just want to reference what the Pennsylvania Climate Impacts Assessment that was done for 2021. It's a very long document. I'm not going to get into it, but I will send it to all of you. Just a few things, sentences from that. climate impacts assessment. Climate impacts assessments information enables government, business, and community leaders to prioritize adaptation actions. Another one, Pennsylvania Health is assessed to be at catastrophic risk from heat waves. Another one, our forests and natural areas that will be impacted by the effects of a warmer climate also are some of our best strategies for responding to climate change. And I bring that up because of the very special woodlands that are on the 4.9 acres where this development is proposing to build. And I know that there is an old 10-year-old somewhere around there, assisted facility proposal. And according to the township's attorney, that original proposal is what will have to be built. Nobody has built that in over 10 years. And I would suggest, since healthcare has drastically changed into networks, it's so unlikely that anyone is going to want to put the money in to a freestanding healthcare facility there. At the last board meeting working session that I was attending, the board said, well, what do we really want built there? And I don't know what the answer to that is. But I think just by looking at the amount of people that are here, I think the community is extremely concerned. And we have a big cleanup. We've had tornadoes. We've never seen this before. So as far as the process that's been in place forever, maybe it needs to be reassessed. Thanks.
Thank you, Ellen. Carol Lockhart.
I'd like to start off by saying thank you to Brandon Ford, who stepped in to answer our emails, and they were answered in a very thoughtful and comprehensive. So thank you very much. And thank you to Baird Standish for making sure that the meeting, everybody not coming here could hear it. I'm glad that the movement has been away from the canyon, which is what this would have been. 3-story buildings right down Haws Lane would have been, you would be able to see what was behind it. And it didn't fit in with the character of the rest of the neighborhood, which is a 2-story building. The second rendering is a little bit better, but it still does have a lot of impervious material. And one of the things that is a consistent problem in Springfield Township is water runoff. So now we're talking about water runoff. We brought up parking problems. There is a big traffic problem because of the curve on Haws Lane there. And the fact that it's going to be so close to where children are walking to school. When does all of the other problems that arise from this development figure in that the development might not be the best fit for the place? If you build it, think about building it, and try to solve each one of these problems, do they then cascade in problems? So what I think I'm asking for is, can you look at all of the problems that could arise from this building before you make the final decision to actually do it? The other problem that comes up in Springfield Township is that we have a lack of affordable housing. And if these townhouses are projected to cost $500,000 to $600,000, that's what the homes across the street may approach if they have added on to their buildings. But they also have standalone properties and are standalone houses. Springfield Township needs affordable housing, this housing may be above the median level of housing here in Springfield. Thank you.
Thank you. Katie Crothers, passing. Richard Metz.
Hi, I just wanted to make a few comments. Everybody's concerned about the storms. There seem to be more in agreement that human activity in terms of carbon dioxide and methane production is causing regular storms to be much more severe. What can we do about these floods, tornadoes, power outages, and heat waves? And what does climate change have to do with the Planning Commission? One thing we should not do is cut down the mature trees, especially unnecessarily, and replace them with buildings and parking lots. Every earth scientist and environmental group agrees that trees store carbon and produce oxygen. Mature trees produce the most. The mature trees on the Haws Lane property are at least 60 to 80 feet high. Many are decades in the making. They can't be replaced by little saplings. They absorb water, they slow down storms, they block winds. They're also part of an ecosystem. They're home to birds, animals, insects, microorganisms, and of course, their underground networks are vast. Having mature trees in our neighborhood is a real benefit. There's a reason, it's one of the reasons why many people choose to live here, for their beauty, for their shade, for the health and the mental health of having those trees. So why at this time of what pretty much every scientist says is a climate emergency would intelligent people cut down mature trees and forests? The answer is that they wouldn't. In the case of Haws Lane, it's crucial to avoid cutting down the woods and many of the mature trees on the property. They're not near houses, not going to be falling on anything. And it's also important to the neighbors that the out of character buildings not be right on the street. Two plans have been presented here tonight, and it's my opinion that they were a calculated attempt to divide the neighbors from those who want to preserve the woods in the back and those who don't want the houses on the street, as if it's an either-or solution. It's not. This is an avoidable environmental disaster, in my opinion. If this project goes through, it will be another Springfield Township ecological tragedy. And I think it's an indication that the current zoning codes and regulations of this township need to be reviewed because they are less than able to adapt and protect the community as our world changes. It would be sad too if the people who were invested in MEH financially were speaking up in favor of this project without declaring their financial interest, of course. Mr. Halligan grew up in Springfield Township. I would suggest that he do his hometown and his former neighbors a favor, consideration, and accept much less profit for this development. Thank you.
Patrick Edis.
Yeah, hi, Patrick Edis, Erdenheim, 720 Avondale Road. So years ago, you were able to bring out 100+ people to your first proposal. And tonight, in the middle of a pandemic, you were able to bring out 40+. So I'd say that's pretty impressive. It's a pretty impressive statement by our community that people really don't like. I mean, you're able to bring out a couple friends of the developers, which is wonderful. But the bottom line is that the first threshold question, which one of the planners brought up, that's the whole ball of wax right here. Are we looking at an institutional solution for this property, or are we going to rezone unnecessarily to appease one developer and convert this to residential use? And honestly, there's nothing compelling at all in these plans that are going to that really justify, changing the institutional use. So the path that we are going down as a community is either institutional or another use that is not residential. So that's really where we're going. Now, WB Homes, I was able to look up, Mr. Canavan, very impressive. I do enjoy your presentations. However, I looked at WB Homes website very quickly, and they're not an institutional developer. I mean, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I suspect that when we move down the institutional route, I imagine that WB Homes, whether as an equitable owner of this property, I imagine you're gonna melt away. So that's where we're going. Planning Commission, we're going institutional use or an alternate use. We're not going in the residential direction.
Kyle, I'm so sorry. Neelan, passing, okay. Kirsten Deagle, passing. Linda Charles,
So I don't have any slides or prepared notes. I'm just talking as a resident who lives 3 houses off of Haws Lane on Preston Road. Your father is our back neighbor. We share a fence. I know where your sister lives. We walk our dogs every day, and every day we watch traffic as if they blow through the stop sign at Preston Road and Haws Lane. And when school starts, it always gives me like a little heart attack because I always think somebody's going to get killed on Haws Lane. And maybe then they'll put a light up here because we see people blowing through, whether they're on bikes, motorcycles now, we saw yesterday, go into oncoming traffic to avoid a policeman. So this is the insanity that we live with every day. Plus, every time there's something at the school, there are countless cars parked on our street for the school activity because there's not enough parking for the school for, say, all the parents who want to see the little Christmas show or whatever it is they're doing over there. Pick up and drop off of kids is dangerous. Trying to walk dogs is getting dangerous. I'm actually at times saying to my husband, we're going to get killed walking dogs in Haws Lane. I mean, people are speeding down Haws Lane, and I can't imagine whether this is built or I'm a retired RN and I've worked at medical facilities. I know how many people work on every shift and how many people are required by law, by regulatory requirement to work to take care of X amount of residents or patients, whatever you'd like to refer to them as. We're still looking at a really poor outcome for the people who live here, for our quality of life, for our green spaces, and for the safety of our kids and our neighbors. That's all I have to say.
RH, thank you.
Burnett, you are. Hi, ladies, gentlemen. I have a couple of simple questions. First question is, how many sites in this township are actually HOA related?
Let's see, we've got Stotesbury, I believe is an HOA.
Condominiums, townhouses and such.
Over in Orland, there's some new ones over there, like off Pennsylvania Avenue, Orland Mill Road.
Okay, so over in the corner of the marsh.
Yeah, and you've got the
Okay.
horse tract. You've got Squires Ridge that went in over on Ridge Pike. Help me out, HOAs. Eagle View Estates, but they might be condos. Those are over near Manor Road and Ridge.
Right. Okay.
There's quite a few. There are
Right.
quite a few.
But I bring the attention, each one of these properties is set up for 3 bedrooms, am I correct, right? Okay, and a 3-bedroom property, it is unreasonable to think there might be 2 to 3 children potentially within that residence.
That's not our experience.
I understand,
I'm not gonna argue with you.
But is it possible?
Possible.
Okay, so where's the kid gonna play? Ride a bike?
In the green space.
Uh,
And then walking.
I do believe that most people would find issue with that. Which is a problem. You have cars, 2 per. Okay, and the average family does have 2. I have 2 and a motorcycle. I don't ride on a Haws Lane. But if you see a yellow motorcycle, it probably isn't me, honestly. All right, but I mean, still, you have nowhere to go. There's nowhere really to go. They're not going to go into the school zone. There's nowhere to bike. You have cars going in and out in both layouts, even in the circular form. You're still going to have nowhere for a kid to go. Next issue that I have, again, follows the environmental impact. This is a watershed region. All this leads into White Marsh, which is nothing but water. And we've all seen the problems as we get to Church Road and the link at the train line. We've all swam that at least 10 times in our lives. My personal favorite stroke is back, what can I tell you? But this is also a big problem. We have the other issue here of Haws. Traffic between Bethlehem Pike and Church Road has been a mess. It's only been increasing. And all you have to do is look at White Marsh Township as a great example of overdevelopment in single lane roads or double lane roads. This isn't particularly wise. You know, a residential is a lot different than bringing in a nursing home. A lot different. I'm done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cecilia Doherty? Okay. Robin Ross? Robert Hartner? And Mark Levitt?
Good evening. I live at Haws and Fraser. My backyard is Parston Hall. And that's a 24-hour-a-day operation. There's people walking all the time, ambulances, staff, and it's not like living in the suburbs, living right there. If this is going to be developed, either the townhomes or another nursing home or something else, which I think would be terrible to have the nursing homes, another industrial use. The other thing is I want to move. I have a big single house. We've lived there 41 years. And I want to downsize. And I would love to move into a place like this, a townhouse. I could afford it. And I wouldn't have the upkeep that I have on my house now. I'm all for this, some projects, some townhome development or whatever. And I've heard all the people complain about environmental, and I've never seen that property except it's woods. I mean, you know, you don't get to enjoy it or anything. You probably enjoy it more if it was developed. Years ago, Haws, Parston Hall had a nice woods right next to on. Then they cut it down, and as far as I know, for no reason, but I'm not complaining about it. What I'm saying is that development happens, and it's going to happen. And if this is an opportunity to get something that we have input into, rather than if they want to put a nursing home or a behavioral science or a behavioral adjustment center or something like that. So that would be, to me, that would be a tragedy. It would increase traffic and serve no purpose. This, we do need, and This is affordable housing. I don't care how much your houses are across the street. Well, that's new.
All right.
Well, I haven't heard anything about how affordable it is, but okay, well,
Okay,
Thank
let
you.
him speak. Thank you. At this time, is there anybody else who would like to make a comment? Sir, can you please state, sure, just state your name and your address since I don't have it on the list for the minutes. And please step up to the mic since we're recording.
Hi, my name's Kevin Duger. I live at 210 Glendalough Road, right around the corner from Patrick Edis on Avondale. So a couple of the things, and I'll agree with the gentleman's comments who just spoke before me. I'd be very opposed to some type of institutional use. And it appears that we're looking at a decision, or that you all are looking at a decision where it would either be these townhomes or some type of institutional use where, you know, when you have people, and this is my first time seeing some of these renderings, when you have people that live in the neighborhood, I would tend to think that those folks would treat the neighborhood and the township maybe a little bit more carefully and you know, special than it would be if you have employees of a large institution coming in and out 24 hours a day. That's just a comment, but the question I want to ask is, has anybody looked at the tax or revenue consequences to both of these proposed or potential uses of this site? One of the things, I work in the insurance brokerage industry, and I work with a lot of nonprofit continuing care retirement communities and behavioral health facilities. A lot of them, the nonprofits, I would imagine, there would be some tax exempt status to maybe property taxes versus these townhomes. So I'll ask my question and sit down, but has anybody looked at those tax consequences, what they might be between the two uses? One, if one was a nonprofit and one of them was townhomes.
Well,
Yeah.
usually not under our purview.
It's not.
No, not at this point. However, it wouldn't be the first time an applicant has submitted a cost analysis to a municipality for review of one use versus another.
Sir, would you like to step up to the mic for public comment? Your name and address, please.
Yeah, my name is Bernie Kling. I'm at Sycamore Lane in Flowertown,
House number, please.
1909.
Thank you.
Resident of 53 years, grew up there. I'm still there. And the bottom of my street was where they took about 11 homes down, floodplain, now Fulgenetti Park. I saw that go underwater the other day. And regardless of how much you agree with climate science, all that, one thing I do know is that all upstream development in my 53 years has contributed to flooding downstream. You don't, it's basic environmental geology. When you have impervious surfaces, things run into other things, into rivers, into streams. We have creeks all over here. They're all interconnected. Anything you do is going to have an impact. So, you know, I just think after what happened last week, we really, I just really think you need to take that into consideration. Anytime you're dealing with services, whether they be institutional or whether they be residential. And by the way, I mean, I got to tell you, the use of the word townhome, that's fine. We used to call them row homes. Okay, they're in a row. And if you told people, you know, a couple of years ago, we're going to build a bunch of row homes, nothing wrong with them, in Springfield Township, they would say, whoa, we moved out of the city to get out of row homes. Now they're moving in townhomes. So, you know, that's just want you to be conscious of that and you know, maybe take into consideration the nomenclature that's being used anymore. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I am on the list of Celia Doherty.
Okay.
So I just wanted to add one thing to what the gentleman just said. So just beyond the playing field is where a lot of the creeks actually began. They get culverted under Fraser Road. But, you know, if you walk in that area, this is where, this is all going to lead to the creeks that run through people's neighborhoods. And then, you know, over Fraser, through the neighborhood, over Bethlehem Pike into neighborhoods that get flooded.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am?
Hi, my name is Lauren Andrews. I live at 1205 Larchwood Road. My biggest concern is the safety of our children, being that it's next to the school. They're walking to school every day, and I do not believe that this plan will promote family life. Being that I've been in WB homes before, a realtor, the price range for that, for a 2 to 3 family child that you're talking about, it doesn't make sense for that price range in that small of a unit. I've shown homes in that price range and they're looking for larger lots. That doesn't make sense. And then you have children that are walking across the street every day to school. And that's a big safety concern to the families that I've talked to in my neighborhood. I think it's asking for an accident. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. In addition to the public comment that has been presented this evening, as Mark amended me, we now have 24 correspondences. So I would appreciate, Mark, if you could read them into the record, and those emails in their entirety will be shared with the applicant, so they have that information.
I'll give you a highlight on each of them. I'm not reading this.
Oh, no, I don't expect you to read them. Lord, no.
In
Not right now.
addition to- In addition to the handout we received from Mr. Lucas, Ms. Lockhart, we also have hers. They testified on their own behalf as to what they felt or like or don't like about the development. We received a correspondence from Ms. Ann Henry. Ms. Henry did respond. She lives at 528 Drayton Road. She would like to see, I'm sorry, her issues are traffic and density. And she is not in favor of residential development here. And she has a safety concern for the children in the neighborhood. Maria Gardner, who resides at 2003 Church Road, unable to attend. She has underlined and bolded. She is vehemently opposed to any kind of residential development on this. She lists climate change, the increase in traffic, the increase in stormwater runoff, and the catastrophic damage that we've seen consistently with recent storms. Marcia Lucas, 1200 Green Hill Avenue, flooding in green space are her concerns. I believe the woodland area should be left intact to help absorb the rains. Elizabeth Hamilton, 1204 Wakefield Road. Her major concerns are the increase in traffic and the safety near the elementary schools, and major concerns about stormwater runoff, given that her neighborhood is already prone to flooding. And they were kind enough to include several pictures of the part-time pond that they have in their rear yard. Dennis Dolan, there's an email. Mr. Dolan lives at 1202 Larchwood Road, resident of over 65 years. Congestion, traffic, parking, just to name a few of his concerns. Also believes the township would benefit greatly by creating a seniors park. Daniel Boring, 417 Norfolk, sent us pictures of, his concern is stormwater runoff and the overdevelopment in Springfield Township, also traffic concerns. And Mr. Boring sent us several photographs of the recent stream that was Norfolk Road. Donald, and I apologize if I butcher this name, DeClean, DECLEENE. Does not give me an exact address, just that they're a 36-year resident of Haws Lane. They're opposed to development, increased traffic. Does not think it's a good idea for housing development to be built next to an elementary school, and has concerns with stormwater runoff, and thinks that the secondary plan would have, is a better plan than the one for 41 units. Barbara Rudnick, RUDNICK, and 303 Haws Lane. She has a list of concerns, one of which she believes the meeting should not be held this evening due to the Jewish High Holy Day. She has issues with the fact that either the school district or the township have stepped up to purchase this property. Believes it would have been better used for open space, exercise trails, school sports fields. Believes the property has environmental possibilities and could have been used for environmental educational purposes. Does not believe that a transitional zone is needed. Believes that the building has historical value, and she objects strongly to a plan for townhouses like the ones proposed. We received correspondence with Miss Ann Henry. Miss Henry did not provide her address, however, she's unable to make the meeting, and she is opposed to the application due to the fact that it will have a negative impact on child safety walking to and from the school. Believes the ground would have been better used for some type of community use, or just left as passive open space. Margaret Mary Burke. Ms. Burke is a resident at 127 Orland Ave. She is opposed to the application due to what she has witnessed in the recent storm, climate change. She states that lives have been lost and there's been excessive property damage due to overdevelopment in our township. Kristen, I apologize, I believe it's Diegel, Diegel. Ms. Diegel resides on Suffolk Road in the Wedgewood neighborhood. And she has a solution. She would like the township to purchase it for open space. We could use Protective Land Act to generate the money. Last you heard, Springfield Township had the second largest surplus of tax dollars in Pennsylvania. She's opposed to it due to stormwater management issues and the loss of the existing tree canopy. Cheyenne Gresham, we received a letter from. Ms. Gresham lives at 8400 Hall Drive, and does not believe the current proposal is complementary with the existing housing stock. Believes before we go this route, we should be offering affordable housing options. We would like to minimize the impermeable surface, provide for better stormwater management, and protect the green space. Felice Kroll, I believe is the last name, Croul. Please forgive me if I mispronounce that. 804 Fraser Road. She's opposed to development of the tract with this much density. She lives on Fraser Road. And there's flooding issues. Also, she's opposed to the increased traffic any development would have in the site. She believes that the property has environmental and quality of life issues. What will we say? Katie, Lewis Bosher, Boucher. We are a resident of, and I apologize because these came in from the commissioner. She's opposed to it due to storm damage over the last 2 years, the effect on climate change, and the opportunity to review the renderings, courtesy of Mr. Ford. And would like to know the board that she's opposed. Miss Jenny French, 604 Grace Lane. Shocked at the density that this development is proposed. Thinks it would be better if it were limited to 20 units. She would like to see more open space. She would like to see walking trails incorporated into your 20-unit plan. And you already have them, connected paths to the schools. She also believes that you should use a pervious paving material for the parking lots. Lisa and Andy Scott, 1510 Nicer Road. They're unable to attend. They thought it was important to communicate their opposition to the development, primarily because of traffic and stormwater management issues that already exist in the neighborhood. Mike McCann, 208 Suffolk Road. McCann apologizes he could not attend this evening. He's in opposition to this due to the same reasons he stated at the Zoom meeting. Traffic during school arrival and pickup, the overflow of parking onto the residential streets across from the school, stormwater runoff, and also overcrowding in the neighborhood. Heather Pennington, 308 Glenway Road, didn't attend this evening's meeting. She's opposed to the application because of the impact it'll have on Fraser Road, including crosswalks to access to the middle and high school complex. There's no stop signs along this road, speeding of the existing traffic on Haws Lane, and the overall impact on her Fraser Road address and her neighbors. The last one I have, I believe I already read, Mike McCann.
He sent-
208 Suffolk, I already read that.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Thank
Madam Chair.
All right, at this time, I'm just going to ask the planning commission if they have any final comments that they would like to share for the minutes to be transmitted to the Board of Commissioners.
Well, something that we developed. And I think Springfield Township is oversupplied with single-family housing now. And, you know, I'm not opposed to, personally opposed to, you know, higher density housing. I think that that can be good for the township if it's well managed. And that's my comment.
Thank you, Terry. Anybody else?
If we just use the mic so I can hear you.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Do you need him to repeat?
No, I heard it. Believe there's an oversight in the flowing of this time that would be opposed to the prior approved plan.
Well, I'm not opposed to higher density development, right?
So I'll comment personally. I take issue with the fact that it was purchased as an institutional property, so you knew what you could develop there. I appreciate the thought of trying to make a more meaningful transition with the community. However, in my opinion, which varies from Jerry's, I would rather see single family more in conformity with the neighborhood. It would create more open space. and better stormwater management. And I think it would be for families in our community. I do want to say that I appreciate the fact that you're being proactive in getting an ISA arborist out to evaluate the trees on the property. Trees are important, as we're hearing from our community members, and the fact that you're being proactive to do that, I just want to thank you for that. And it'll be very interesting to see, depending on what route you go, how you preserve those trees and that canopy coverage in our community. I want to say that our planning commission, so you know, is very sensitive when we have subdivision and land development come in, that we take hard looks at stormwater management. Our goal is to not only meet the requirements by our zoning, but to exceed. That means that we want to make improvements. And you make improvements one property at a time as they come across this table, because it may be that we get one development, but we only get one crack at it every 30, 50 years, whatever it is. So I want you to know that we do take our role here very seriously with land development. And I do want to say that I appreciate that the applicant is trying to find something that is more in conformity with the neighborhood. It is only my own personal opinion that I think single family fits more in with that community off of Haws Lane. Anybody else?
I don't disagree with Mandy's assessment. On the other hand, I do think that, as Jerry said, we do have quite a number of single family dwellings. I live in one, you live in one. So, but I do think that having a variety of housing uses in the township is a positive. We do need affordable housing. It's just very difficult in this part of Pennsylvania to get affordable housing. I sat through. Affordable is a term that's used in planning. And it's really so low and moderate income housing. Which, well, no, probably less than that. And there's a type of developer that does that kind of work. And that's not what these people do. Right. So affordable housing is a whole different issue. What you think of as affordable housing is not what a planner or what the planning community talks about as affordable. It's a whole different type of development, and that's not what these people do. The one point I do want to make is I do think this is a much better use than the institutional use that was proposed before. We do have a number of institutional uses like that in the community. And I don't know how many of you will recall, but I recall it clearly, since I live in Windmore, that one of the first things that happened in the pandemic was that we had outbreaks in those uses. And so it was a very dire situation. So I don't think adding to the number of institutional uses for older people, I'm an older person, but you know, is really going in the right direction for this property, since it is surrounded by residential. So that's my comment.
Yeah, I'll join in on this, just so that I think it's important you get a sense of where the planning commission is, and we're pretty diverse in our views. I'm on the issue of this type of this housing type. I'd like to see more of it. I'd like to see more of it, but in a location that's better suited to it, and that is where there is mass transit, and perhaps where it's not so high priced, you know, so that it gets closer to, if not affordable, at least moderate housing. This is probably a better land use than the institutional use from so many ways, in terms of traffic, in terms of land cover. Both configurations from an urban forestry point of view have some, you could argue, the basis, it depends on the data of what's actually on the site. And I want to, the environmental issues that people mention, I'm very heartened to hear so many people speak of the need for more land in the township that is not developed, more land in the township that is left and promoted and used for natural resource uses in a term. That's part of comprehensive planning. And that's part of, like, not just in your neighborhood, but in all the neighborhoods across the township. And if there was a township-wide demand for that, then perhaps the commissioners would look and it would become part of the financial planning, it would become part of your taxes. I mean, there's a cost to that because you're taking away land that has an economic use and benefit and is already designated for an economic use and return. That's what development does. It says it's a commodity, not a commodity for the public good, but a commodity for private transaction and wealth building. You have to say, well, okay, we actually want to have a natural history wealth. We want to have natural resource wealth. That's a different way to look at the whole township. And it's a different way to look at zoning. And that's something that you have to work with your commissioners on. And I will tell you, I wasn't checking out the Philly score, although I did. It's 0-0. I was looking at aerial views of the neighborhood. That's where I walk. My wife and I, we don't have a dog, but we walk each other. No leash is required, and we don't poop on anyone's lawn. And we walk around. One of the things I've always noticed is the amount of lawn that's in. And you say, what could we be doing? We should save, the township should save this land. We do not have any ability to work with private landowners. That's not the role of the planning commission. And it's limited role, I think, in some way with the township. But as private landowners, you and your neighbors have ample opportunities to plant trees. A lawn has almost the same runoff potential as a driveway, depending on what's been happening with the rainfall. And with the slopes in our area, it's not just the development and the removal of the forest and replacement with parking lots, it's the replacement and the management of lawns as a primary land use. So one of the things that, regardless of what happens here, that can happen in these neighborhoods is to plant trees and to look for opportunities, to get the assistance of the township, perhaps, to say, in planting trees. There's an environmental advisory committee. There's a street tree committee. There's, there are opportunities. There's PHS has the tree tenders. There's opportunities to do this. So I'm saying it's not always an us and them. Sometimes it's an us. What can we do with the land that we can control, that we do own? And that's private property. Sorry for that stump, but I just had to.
That's all right.
Can I ask a question? What happens now? In other words, does your recommendation go to the September 13th Board of Commissioners workshop?
We're not making a recommendation
tonight.
The Board of Commissioners asked us to hold an opportunity for dialogue and discussion to collect feedback from the public and feedback from the Planning Commission. So this is all going to be packaged and sent off to the BOC. So my recommendation is the place where you will make most impact is the ears of your commissioners. So you are encouraged to attend their meetings.
Is this going to be on the agenda there?
So, yeah, so basically, we moved our workshop would normally have been last night. We moved it till next week. And I promised specifically Jonathan Cobb and everybody else on the board that we would make some form of a commitment or decision about where we want to go and not drag our heels, you know, in October. But that means that we have not very long to figure this out, which means we have next week, which is next workshop. And we'll, at that point, develop our questions for these guys, you know, send them back to the drawing board or whatever. And we have another shot at it in September at that workshop and discuss it again then. And then we'd like to try to, and I don't know, and I don't have any opinion about this. I don't know where it's going to go, but we'd like to, you know, move in some direction. And the issue, the timing issue is that basically whatever we do, if we got to get on the zoning hearing board, you know, agenda, or we're going to do a text amendment, we're going to do this or that, you got to advertise it, you got to do a public hearing. You need 60, 90 days to advertise all this stuff and, you know, wrap all this kind of stuff up, you know.
Under the public comment part of.
And yeah, so yeah, we'll give space for that, you know. So that'll be next Monday. And it'll be a similar kind of thing. I mean, you know what? I mean, our meetings go until midnight sometimes. Nobody wants to be there till 3 in the morning. So, you know, so if everybody, but let me also say this, you know, because I've been taking a lot of notes and I'm very sensitive to this whole issue about the environment and how it development impacts the environment, and that's really important. And, you know, I'm getting a lot of comments like, I don't like this development and all that, but the more important issue that we have to really deal with is not just, do you like this development, but do you like it better than 107 units that at some point we're gonna get, and I'm pretty convinced we're gonna get it if you don't get this. Okay? No, you shaking your head. It's not gonna be a wheat field for the rest of our lives. It's just not gonna happen. Okay, I will bet you $100 right now, you know? So that's because by right, the law says it can be developed, 107 units can be developed. By right, you don't need a public forum for that. If they do everything exactly the way, you know, the instructions say to do it, they can just go ahead and do it. They don't need anybody's, you know, permission to do that, okay? So what we have to decide is this better than that or not? And, you know, I'm on the fence. I don't know, is residential better than institutional? I've heard, you know, different arguments. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, you know? I'd like to find out the next month. I'd like to, you know, come up with some, you know, opinion about that.
Ma'am,
If the zoning commission can change the zoning for development like this, why can't it change the zoning?
They don't change the zoning. They give waivers, or variances, I should say.
Okay, well, I mean, if it can be changed, whatever, I don't have to say the right language, but why can't it be changed for something the community wants and the board, working with the board?
It could.
It could, right?
Well, I mean, could you change, in other words, could we just change the zoning?
Yeah.
Just throw everything out and start from scratch, is what you're saying?
Well, if the community, if this is not going to happen, it's not like the only thing that.
All right, so let me say this. They're approved, it doesn't matter what we do. We could change the zoning, but they're approved for 107 units from hell or high water. We could just basically, you know what I mean? That's the
But
point.
you can change it for this development.
We could say yes, you know, we could, all right, so here's the reality. If we decide we're going to zone this for one house, these guys are going away, okay? But, you know, you could build a house. But the guys that are approved for 107 units can still build 107 units because they're already pre-approved. They're not going away, okay? So as long as they don't change anything and they build it within their envelope of what they're allowed to do, they can go ahead and do that. And that's the concern is, you know, do you like that or do you like this? Or do you like something else? And that's, you know, that's.
Okay. I'm going to allow one more comment and then we're going to wrap this up for the evening, sir.
So the only other comment was that Brian Halleck offered this to the township.
Okay,
So the township can buy it, do whatever they want with it.
you're right.
So you take it out of the private hands, give them a reasonable price, and do whatever you want.
Okay,
Don't all place with trees and bushes.
all right.
So
So we did go down that path. We tried, we looked for some grants and funding for some of that. It's a lot of money. And we decided that if we were going to go that path, we would want to do it through grants. You know, Brandon helped us, look at what's out there. There's really sort of nothing out there right now.
So.
And the school district doesn't want it.
Before, they can put it, that's 3 of these houses. If the township wants to buy it, just buy it. Do anything you want with it. You don't have to worry about institutional. You don't have to worry about residential.
Okay.
They are
So,
not choices.
but you know what? So there are different points of views about this. So that's one point of view. The flip point of view is any developer can hold the township hostage and say, you don't want to develop, you should just buy it from us and turn it into a park. And that could just go on forever. That's another way of looking at it.
Well, he's willing to do it. He was willing to do it. Take him up on it.
There's a financial consideration. The township is properly financed, it has good ratings. Continue to do this all over the place. Your ratings aren't going to go up, they're going to go down, and your taxes are going to go increase. So there's always an option. I mean, there's always an after effect, one way or the other.
Properties in private hands. So it's not right for all these people to tell a private individual what they do with their property. So buy it from them and then do whatever you want.
Okay, now the other issue is this, if we get appraisal and, we can only pay as much as an appraisal tells us we can, pay. In fact, we at one time tried to buy the Worth property and we did not succeed in buying that property because somebody came in and paid more for it. But we weren't able to outbid them because we weren't allowed to.
All right.
There's another issue.
I'm going to end the meeting for now.
It goes on like that.
Okay.
There are all sorts of complications.
You all hear that you have another opportunity to come before the Board of Commissioners, okay? Again, this was just an open dialogue, and I want to thank you all for coming out tonight, for being sensitive to what's going on in your community, just like we are. And we're going to continue to follow this, and we'll look forward to seeing you back here at the Planning Commission, because I'm sure you're going to be coming back. So we'll see you all again. Thank you, everybody.